My name is Donald Cleveland. I'm the author of Revitalizing America, a Declaration Against Our Government. I've developed this series of videos based in great part on the book that I wrote. The videos are designed to help American people understand the development of government in the United States of America. So we'll look at where our governance started, where we are today, and where we need to go in the future. I wrote the book because, like many of you, I have a feeling that something just isn't right with our governance. The government is supposed to be for we the people, and not for we the government, or we the corporation, or we who believe that only one religion is right and everyone else must bend to that religion. Sometimes or somehow the promises that were made to us and which we believe about our governance have been and are being broken. Some parts of our government seem to be working against the norms of common sense, and in many cases, privileged or special interests control the government for their advantage and our disadvantage. But we aren't alone. Many Americans feel the same way. We've been taught to believe in the promises of our governance that were made in the following documents. First, we have the Declaration of Independence that says all men, well, what about the women, were created equal with certain unalienable rights, and among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The preamble of the Constitution states, we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty, do hereby, and it goes on into the Constitution. The Gettysburg Address says that we should have a government of, by, and for the people. The Pledge of Allegiance states that we have one nation. Most of these fundamental promises have not been delivered to the average American, and many times they've been sacrificed or defiled to benefit a select few. Just look at two examples. First, when World War II came to an end, we punished, in fact executed Nazis who conducted medical experiments on humans without their informed consent. Yet, throughout the war and after, the United States government, a state government, and state and county medical society did the same things in the United States. They conducted experiments by withholding care from black syphilis victims without telling them to see how they would be deformed or die. More illegal experiments using radiation, LSD, and bacteria were carried out on the U.S. population, but no person has ever been charged with a crime, sent to jail, executed, even though Americans have died as a result of these illegal experiments. Second, the court system is a terrible joke despite the 14th Amendment's promises of due process and equal protection. Federal district courts can have different rules of local practice, and these rules of the court don't even have to be published or reviewed, as do other federal rules. The judges create their own little kingdoms and their own laws. The U.S. Supreme Court's behavior is deplorable. On average, 7,000 appeals are made to the court annually, but only 70 or 1% are accepted by the court for review. So 99% of them aren't even reviewed or taken up by the court. At the same time, the justices take a 3-month vacation to teach in other countries, for which they get paid by the students and the universities while collecting their court pay as well. Chief Justice Roberts went to Malta, a Mediterranean island, to teach for several summers. Further, the justices don't publish their financial disclosure reports, as do other federal officials. Things need to change, but voting for candidates from one party or another, limiting terms or sequestering appropriations, won't change a thing. The only thing that will change the way things are done is to change the rules of government's game. And the rules of the government's game are in the Constitution. But we don't need to think only about the United States Constitution. States are a good place to start as well. Ballotpedia, www.ballotpedia.org, reports that 26 states allow initiative and referendums to create and amend the state laws or state constitutions. Many historic reforms in the United States started at the state level. Pennsylvania was the first state to regulate the age of persons working in silk, cotton, and woolen mills in 1915. No one person under 12 years of age could work in these industries after that law was passed. Hawaii became the first state to mandate health insurance coverage in 1975. So massive change can start at the state level. And let's not forget, after all, the United States emerged from 13 separate colonies. The U.S. Constitution was not perfect when it was written, and we know that because it's been amended 27 times. With the exception of the 18th Amendment on prohibition, each change has moved us closer to a government that will give us equality, true justice, a single national purpose, and a government of, by, and for the people. So my book not only discusses the failure of the governments to deliver on fundamental promises, but also its willingly permitting and sometimes participating in harmful conduct against us. Instead of complaining about these problems and doing nothing, I've proposed a series of constitutional amendments to change the government game in favor of the average citizen. However, we can't arrive at an understanding of where we are today if we don't know what got us here. So I'll spend a little time dealing with just what got us here. It starts over 3,000 miles away and with a war that lasted 30 years. The 30 Years' War was initially the consequence of the breakup of a corrupted Catholic Church and the emergence of other governmental-backed religions like the Anglicans, the Lutherans, the Calvinists, and followers of Zwingli. Each branch of Christianity knew that their way to worship God was the right way, and they were willing to kill for it. Newly formed Christian groups all wanted to take the wealth and the parishioners away from the Pope and the Catholic Church. During these struggles, the state, the kings, princes, dukes, threw their support behind different religious groups. So the state supported the establishment of religion, and the state-established religion determined if you lived or died. It was not uncommon to execute other human beings by burning them at the stake because they didn't believe in your brand of Christianity. That long-based religious war caused thousands of Europeans to flee the slaughter and set out to a new continent to seek freedom from the kings, the princes, the bishops, and the ministers that created the horrible wars that they had to live through. But it wasn't the only one long war. Between 1600 and 1699, depending upon the sources, there were 59 separate wars in Europe, not including the English Civil Wars. Those wars in the 1600s were preceded by 100 years of war between the English and the French in the 1500s. If that wasn't enough, there were another 27 wars in the 1700s which preceded the American Revolution. While a number of wars were purely power struggles between individuals, the insertion of religion into the reason for killing each other gave new impetus to driving instability in Europe. These wars created grave insecurity for the average person in Europe. Religion gave the opposing sides a position of self-righteousness which justified the killing of others as witches and heretics. It gave each side justification to hang and burn and dismember their neighbor, their fellow countrymen and women, and to commit cross-border slaughter in the name of their God and their belief. Does it remind you of the Taliban, of ISIS, or the religious police in Iran? Based on my research, it appears that my own father's ancestors fled to North America from Europe and settled in Connecticut in 1639. They, like many others, were war refugees. Such refugees were the parents and grandparents of the American revolutionaries and the authors of the Constitution. They carried with them the stories of the massacres, the burning, and the atrocities in the villages and cities and the plundering that went on between 1618 and 1648. One such story is about the sacking of the city of Magdeburg in 1631, where 20,000 persons, including soldiers and civilians, were slaughtered. Magdeburg was a Protestant city, and the army that plundered the city and killed its defenders and civilians represented the Catholic army supported by the Holy Roman Empire. While many fled to America to escape from the religiously motivated strife, others brought it with them and carried on violence motivated by religious beliefs. A good example is the Salem Witch Trials in 1692 and 1693. Can you imagine telling people that they were witches and hanging them for that reason, based upon a religious belief that witches existed. The Puritans who landed in Plymouth were breakaway groups from the Anglican Church of England, and they actually banned the celebration of Christmas for 10 years in their new American settlement. The Puritans had learned to despise Catholics and the Roman Church in their European struggles. So not surprisingly, anti-Catholic laws, disabilities, and hatred permeated almost all of the English colonies. To get around the Protestant hatred, the Catholics also received a charter to found the Catholic colony of Maryland in 1634. So the seeds of government or state-sponsored religious disharmony were already sown in the Americas during its colonization. The colonies in America were themselves convulsed by the upheaval in England, and George Calvert's, Maryland's founder, was supporting the King of England, King Charles, a Catholic king, and it put Maryland at risk of attack by its Protestant neighbors. Indeed, the Protestant assault came in 1645. It was led by Richard Ingle, a Protestant merchant who represented the Puritan government in power in England at the time. He initially fled the colony, but returned on a ship named, guess what? The Reformation, with Puritan reinforcements constituting an anti-Catholic army. Ingle attacked St. Mary's City, the capital of Maryland, in 1645 and caused 2 years of utter chaos. Jesuit priests were seized and sent in chains to England, and the property of prominent Catholics was plundered and burned. Calvert, the founder of Maryland, fled to Virginia during the conflict, but returned with an army in 1646 and restored some semblance of order. So the seeds of government or state-sponsored religious disharmony were already sown in America during its colonization. The anti-Catholic war in Maryland and other European wars fought in North America, including King William's War, Queen Anne's War, King George's War, the French and Indian War, and the numerous Indian uprisings supported by either the English or the French prior to the Revolutionary War, were all evidence of foreign interference in the affairs of the American colonies. So the slaughters in the European wars and the upheaval of the English Civil War reached into the new colonies in America. The English Civil War started with the dethroning and the beheading of a Catholic king, Charles I. Then, years followed the rule under the dictatorial Puritan leadership of Oliver Cromwell, which included such things as the prohibition of dancing, athletic games, theater, and other amusements. These dictates led to the subsequent overthrow of Cromwell and the restoration of a Catholic king, King Charles II. Then, after Charles II died, he was replaced by his son, James II, who was subsequently deposed and banished to the Netherlands because he was a Catholic, and he was replaced by his Protestant sister and her husband, William and Mary. So the government and religion were tied at the hip. The state controlled the religion, and the religion controlled the state. Sometimes, when people push enough, though, for freedom, the top echelons of power finally yield before they literally lose their heads. During the unrest surrounding the English Civil War, Charles II approved the Habeas Corpus Act of 1679. Before that act, a person could be held in a dungeon or a jail without being produced to a court to be charged with the crime or released. They were just sort of vanished forever. Then in 1689, Parliament passed a Bill of Rights. Does that sound familiar? A Bill of Rights? That Bill of Rights restricted the king and queen from suspending laws, levying taxes, maintaining an army without the consent of Parliament. The king and queen could not interfere with parliamentary elections. Parliament was required to meet frequently. The king and queen must be, religion and state again, Anglican. The people were guaranteed basic civil liberties, including petitioning government and protection against excessive bails and fines and cruel and unusual punishment. So what would anyone, including the Founding Fathers, have learned from the history of the chaos that preceded the establishment of the United States of America? Well, here are some lessons that I'm sure that they learned. Number one, kings, queens, and princes, royalty, cannot be included in the new government of the United States. Number two, The power to tax, to make war, and imprison citizens cannot be vested in one person or one branch. Number 3, the government should never be involved in the establishment of a religion, and religion should never control the government. And number 4, standing armies controlled by one person make it too easy to go to war. If we take the time to actually read the Constitution, it's possible to see how the authors dealt with each of these issues described above. There are 3 distinct branches of government. No one branch has dictatorial power or can establish a royal family. War, taxing, and imprisonment are divided between the branches of government, and while freedom of religion is granted, the establishing of a religion by the government is prohibited. So, well, did they do a pretty good job, the authors of the Constitution? Not really, because the intent of the Constitution is set forth in the preamble and promises a democracy. But we were handed a republic with slavery, no protection of human rights, and very few protective civil rights. And that's why we need to revitalize America, revitalize the promise of America. And for more information on the promises made and broken, you can visit my website at revitalizeamericanow.org, or better yet, you can buy a copy of the book on Revitalizing America from either my website or from Amazon.com. We'll speak again. Thank you.